Good afternoon and welcome back to Stories with Don on this fine September day. What a beautiful day it is today. The temperature is perfect for me. I just love this kind of weather. Anyway, I hope you had a good weekend and you are ready to hear some more stories. And so we are on Robin Hood and we are on chapter 14. And this chapter is entitled Robin Hood Meets a Tinker by the Way. And a tinker is somebody who made things out of metal. That's what a tinker was, in case you were wondering. When the poor old bishop got back to Nottingham without a penny of his dearly loved money, he took counsel with the sheriff, whose treasure chamber was empty. Both were filled with a most furious rage against Robin Hood, and issued a proclamation that a warrant would be given, in the name of the king, to any man who would go against the famous outlaw to seize him, and that a reward of £100 would be paid for the capture of Robin Hood. Now, when this proclamation was made at the market cross, the crowd of townsmen who heard it looked at each other and smiled. They knew how easy it was to offer £100 for Robin Hood, and how hard it would be to earn the money, and not one of them came forward to offer to take up the quest. But on the outskirts of the crowd stood one who was not a townsman. This was a short, thick, sturdy fellow, with a very dirty face and a turned-up nose. On his back was a leathern bag of tools, hanging from the handle of a large hammer which he carried on his shoulder and held with his left hand. In his right hand was a long, stout crab-tree staff, upon which he listened with a deepening interest to the proclamation. He was a wandering tinker, and his name was John Sly. £100, thought Sly to himself. Why, 'tis a noble sum of money, and all for seizing some outlaw rogue in the forest near at hand. I might mend pots and pans all my life and never see so much money. Faith, I'll have a try at that. He tapped a man nearby on the shoulder. Is it difficult, friend, to come at the place this Robin Hood haunts? Asked Sly. Nothing easier, said the townsman with a grin. But when you're there, then 'tis likely your troubles will begin. Sly the tinker nodded loftily, for the day was hot, and his last silver penny had gone in ale to quench his thirst. I warrant you he will not slip through my fingers so easily, said the tinker, and went forthwith to obtain the warrant which should give him authority to arrest the notorious outlaw, Robin Hood. Not only did he obtain the warrant, but full information as to the place where he might meet the person named in it, and he set out of town by break of day next morning to make his fortune by seizing Robin Hood. I'll show these north country thickheads a trick or two, said Sly the tinker, twirling his great quarterstaff round his head. They have no idea of the cunning and wit of south country people. I'm a Banbury man, and we don't breed dullers in Oxfordshire. By the time he had been walking for a couple of hours, the day was hot. He sat down under a great oak at a turning of the way to mop his forehead and to glance over the warrant, the possession of which made him very proud. He had returned the paper to his wallet and was about to go on his road when he saw a tall man in a suit of scarlet cloth, a sword at his side, walking gently towards him. Good, said Sly to himself. Here comes a fellow who looks like a respectable yeoman. I'll warrant he can put me on the right track for finding the haunt of this rogue of an outlaw. So Sly went at once toward the yeoman in the scarlet suit. The latter had been walking with his eyes on the ground, and when he looked up and saw the tinker with his bag of tools over his shoulder, he greeted the newcomer with a pleasant smile and a courteous wave. The seal of the day to you, said the tinker, and I'll go bail you're a native of these parts. True, I live near at hand, said the polite stranger. And where do you live? I am a tinker. My name is Sly, and I come from Banbury, replied the man of pots and pans. And what is the news with you? Why, I fear me it will not be pleasant for a man of your trade, said the stranger, laughing softly. It is that 2 tinkers were set yesterday in the stocks for drinking too freely of ale and beer. Marry, come up, growled Slide, who was rather a short-tempered fellow. Practice none of your jokes upon me, friend, or you may have reason to know that I carry a heavy stick. You asked for the news, returned the stranger mildly, and I obliged you. But come, you are a man who goes from town to town and village to village. You have the news of a half a shire at your finger ends. What have you to tell? My news, cried Sly, is that there is 100 pounds of good money to be had for the picking up. Say you so, said the stranger. How may that be? Why, in these woods there is a bold outlaw they call Robin Hood, and I have a warrant to seize him. And as sure as I can get my hands on him and drag him to Nottingham, there is 100 pounds reward to clink in my pocket. Now, if you'll help me in this matter, I'll give you a good share of the reward. The stranger scratched his forehead and seemed to be in deep thought for a time. "'Tis a fine sum of money," said he at last, "and I believe I could show you where he is to be found." Good, good, chuckled Sly the tinker. Let us go together, for I have a warrant from the king to take this outlaw wherever I find him. Point him out to me, and I'll make a rich man of you. Let me see the warrant, said the friendly stranger. If it is all right, I will do the best I can to bring about a meeting between you and him. But Sly only grinned and winked the other eye. No, no, he said, I'll not show my warrant to anyone. I'll trust no one with it. Help me to find him, and you will share the reward. Refuse to help me, and 'tis all one. I'll find him myself. I see you are a cautious fellow, said the stranger. Well, I do not blame you. We meet with strange companions on the road in these days, but the reward is great, and I tell you frankly, I should like to share in it. Suppose we go together as far as the Royal Hart, and talk it over with a can of good ale. With all my heart, cried the tinker, licking his lips at the idea of a tankard of ale, and hastening to follow the stranger along the way. They went a mile or more, came to an inn, and met the landlord at the door. The landlord was very respectful to the stranger, and bustled off at once to fetch a great jug of ale and a flagon of Canary wine. The tinker's little eyes glittered again at sight of such provision, and he tossed off cup after cup with heartiest goodwill, and many expressions of delight at such splendid entertainment. He did most the drinking, for the stranger only sipped at his cup, and explained that he was deep in thought, planning the best and surest way in which to seize Robin Hood. By the time the jug and flagon had been emptied, the tinker's head began to nod, and soon he was snoring peacefully in a corner of the settle. The stranger smiled and opened Sly's wallet. From this he took out the warrant and read it with a broader smile still upon his face. When he had read the paper, he slipped it into his pocket. Then he rose and marched softly from the place. Here's a picture of the tinker taking a nap. "10 minutes later, the landlord came into the room. The host started when he saw that the man in scarlet had gone, leaving the dirty and rather ragged tinker all alone, and began to feel uneasy about his bill. He stepped across to the settle and seized Sly by the top collar. "Wake up," he said, and shook the sleeping tinker. "No more, friend, no more," said the half-aroused tinker. "I have drunken well enough already at your expense." "I'll take care it isn't my expense," cried the landlord. "Wake up and settle the reckoning." "Settled the reckoning, have you?" said Sly, who still thought he was talking to the stranger in scarlet. Why, that's noble of you, but trust me, I shall not forget it when we come to sharing up the reward." "I want no reward," shouted the landlord. "Give me my just dues, and I am content." And with this he gave the tinker such a shake that Sly was fully awakened. "Why, what, how, where?" said the tinker in confused fashion. "Where is my comrade, the bold yeoman who was to lead me to my journey's end, who was to pay the shot of this day's reckoning?" Then the tinker's eye fell on his unstrapped wallet. He caught it up and looked in. Now he began to bellow like a bull with a ring in his nose. "Help! Help!" he roared. "I am ruined. I am undone. I have been robbed, plundered, and betrayed. Where is my warrant? My warrant from the king. It is lost and stolen." "Warrant?" cried the landlord. "Who would trust such a fellow as thou art with a warrant? And against whom it was drawn?" "Marry, good host, but I had a warrant from the sheriff of Nottingham himself, and it was a warrant from the king, which might have done me good, that is, to take the bold outlaw some call Robin Hood." "Robin Hood?" cried the landlord. "Why, this affair becomes stranger and stranger. That was Robin Hood with whom you came in here and were drinking. 'Twas Robin in a dress of scarlet instead of green, such as he commonly wears." When the tinker heard this, he opened his mouth and eyes till he could open them no wider, and his uproar was stopped dead in pure surprise and astonishment. At last he gasped, "That Robin Hood? Men told me he was a fierce-looking fellow, with a savage face, a true outlaw. Why, that man looked like a worthy yeoman." "Robin carries many faces under one hood," replied the landlord. "But it was he, as sure as I stand here, and as sure as you have drunk a great jug of my best ale and a flagon of my best canary." "But he was going to pay the shot," cried Sly. "He asked me to come hither to drink with him." "I know naught about that," said the landlord in a dry tone. "I only know that my drink has gone, and you must meet the reckoning." "How much?" said the tinker sadly. 10 shillings, was the reply. 10 shillings? I have not 10 farthings in the world." "Then you must hand over your hammer and your bag of tools," said the landlord. "What?" cried Sly. "My hammer and tools? How am I to earn my living?" "You should have thought of that before running into debt," returned the other. The tinker raved and stormed and shouted. He raged against the quiet stranger in scarlet. He denounced the landlord. He swore he would have the law of them all. "Very good," said the landlord, "but the law will be on my side, I think. Here you sit drinking with an outlaw, and when he slips off, you try to cheat me of the reckoning. I fancy the law will have something to say to you about that." The tinker saw that the landlord spoke truth, and that he must e'en make the best of a very bad bargain. So he gave up his hammer and tools, took up his great crabstick, and left the Royal Heart in as sad case as ever a tinker found himself. "If only I could come across that rogue in scarlet," he said to himself, and swung his great stick vengefully about his head. "Would I not thrash his jacket for him? A plague on the knave!" When the tinker came out of the inn, he dashed away along the road, and by sheer good luck took the very track which Robin was following. For before Sly had gone a mile, he caught a bright flash of color at a bend of the path, and next saw the stranger in scarlet standing to watch a herd of deer. Up rushed Sly as fast as he could, shouting threats and calling on the man in scarlet to turn and face him. Robin Hood turned at once and smiled when he saw the angry tinker. "What knave is this," quoth he, "that draws to me so near?" No knave, roared Sly. "The boot's on the other leg this time. It seems I've found Robin Hood after all, and now I'll show him with my crab-tree staff who has done wrong and who is to be paid for it." And saying that, he ran in with a wonderful nimbleness, and fetched Robin a stunning crack with the great stick. So quick was the tinker that down came the staff upon his head, whack, before Robin could draw his stroke. Robin reeled under the shrewd stroke, but managed to draw his blade and face his foe. For 2 or 3 moments he was compelled to dodge hither and thither to escape the sweeping blows. Then in he dashed, for his blood was up, and the tinker was forced to act on his defensive. But Sly proved as good a man in defense as in attack. Time and again he caught Robin's blade on his hard crab stick, and metal rang on wood till the forest echoed again. Then with a swift twirl of his huge cudgel, Sly followed up a parry with a stroke at Robin's sword arm, and caught him so smart a rap on an elbow that the arm became numb from fingertip to shoulder, and the outlaw could hold his sword no longer. "Let us cry halt for a moment, Tinker," said Robin. "I would e'en beg a boon of thee." "A boon indeed," cried the tinker. "Before I grant that, I'll hang you on this tree. Marry, come up, but it seems I've taken the great Robin Hood, and the reward is mine." Upon thought of this, Sly was so merry that he cut a caper, and then looked about to see which road ran towards Nottingham. When Robin saw that the tinker's head was turned for a moment, he seized his horn and blew the forest call. "Nay, nay," roared the tinker, "there is no time to be blowing calls and winding horns. You must come along with me, or I must e'en give you a few gentle love taps with this little persuader of mine," and he made his mighty crabtree whistle through the air. But at that instant up bounded Little John and Will Scarlet, running to the aid of their master. The tinker stared in surprise at Little John, for he had never seen such a giant of a man before. "By my faith," cried Sly, "but here comes the stoutest knave I ever set eyes on. But if ye think that I will flee, ye know not Jack Sly." And he set his back against an oak and placed himself in guard, his quarterstaff held in readiness, either to strike or to parry. Robin Hood sat down on a bank, for he was too stiff to stand so sharply had the tinker's staff played tattoo on him. "What is wrong, master?" cried Little John, "and why do you sit so wearily beside the highway?" "By Our Lady," said Robin Hood, "here is a tinker that stands by that hath paid well my hide." "Say you so, master?" cried Little John. "Then I would fain try a turn with him. We'll see if he can do as much for me." The huge outlaw sprang forward and swung up his heavy staff, and the tinker faced him as boldly as possible. But before the sticks clashed together, Robin Hood called upon his lieutenant to hold. "I do not blame the man," said the leader. "He had good reason to pay me a few knocks. I had marred his fortune by taking the warrant for my arrest, by which he set much store. But if I have spoiled this fortune one way, I will make it in another. Tinker, how dost thou fare on the road?" So, master," replied Sly. "Sometimes a few jobs and a supper, sometimes a day's march without a penny taken. Then, if a pot of ale should come my way, I am like to find myself fast in the stocks." "Not a very gay life," laughed Robin. "A dog's life, master," replied the tinker. "A dog's life." "Change it, then, for ours in the merry greenwood," cried the outlaw. "By day we hunt the deer. At night we feast high on venison around our blazing fire, and wash down the feast with nut-brown ale. Come, join us." "Aye, master, that I will," cried the tinker. "Such a life will fit me like hand and glove. I am with you to live or to die." And Robin and he clasped hands in the bargain. So John Sly, the tinker, turned from hunting Robin Hood to become Robin's sworn man, and he made as staunch a servant as he had been stout as an enemy. The old ballad which tells us how Robin won this recruit ends with Robin Hood's commendation of his new henchman. "In manhood he is a mettled man, and a mettle man by trade. Never thought I that any man should have made me so afraid. And if he will be one of us, we will all take one fare, and whatsoever we do get, he shall have his full share. So the tinker was content with them to go along, and with them a part to take, and so I end my song. And that is the end of that chapter. So Robin Hood has kind of gotten beat, but he has added another person to his group of followers. Well, I hope you have a good rest of the day. I hope that life is treating you well and that you are healthy. May God bless you. Goodbye.